What's up, Vikings Nation? If you're feeling that mix of frustration and hope heading into the offseason, you're not alone. After a tough 2025 campaign, the Minnesota Vikings are back in the spotlight, and today's Minnesota Vikings news brings a name that could change everything in the secondary. Here's the teaser that should get your heart racing. Mel Kiper just dropped his first 2026 mock draft, and the Vikings are linked to a potential shutdown corner at pick number 18. A player who could finally help fix one of the most painful problems this team has faced for over a decade. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into what this pick means, why it matters so much for the Vikings, and whether this could finally be the answer fans have been begging for in Minnesota. The Vikings entered 2025 with playoff expectations, but reality hit hard. Inconsistency, missed opportunities, and especially struggles on defense made it clear that this roster still has holes that must be addressed. One of the biggest red flags was the lack of takeaways. Minnesota finished the season with just 8 interceptions, tied for the 6th fewest in the entire NFL, and that's simply not good enough for a team that wants to compete at the highest level. When you combine that stat with breakdowns in coverage late in games, it's obvious why cornerback has become a top priority in every early draft conversation surrounding the Minnesota Vikings. That brings us to Mel Kiper, ESPN's longtime draft guru. Love him or hate him, when Kiper speaks, the league listens, and his mock drafts often shape the conversation months in advance. In his first 2026 mock draft, Kiper has the Vikings staying right where they are at pick number 18. No trades, no surprises, just a direct shot at filling a critical need. And the name he sends to Minnesota is LSU cornerback Mansour Delane, a player who's quickly climbing draft boards and turning heads across college football. Delane is 22 years old and comes to LSU after spending 3 seasons at Virginia Tech. His move to the SEC only elevated his profile, proving he could dominate against elite competition. According to Kiper, Delane brings top-end ball skills and advanced coverage technique, exactly the kind of traits the Vikings defense has been missing on the outside. For a team starving for playmakers in the secondary, that description alone is enough to make fans lean forward in their seats. Kiper didn't stop there. He directly pointed out the Vikings' current cornerback situation, noting that while the team revamped the room in 2025 free agency, depth remains a serious concern. Behind Byron Murphy Jr. and Isaiah Rodgers, there's uncertainty, inexperience, and a lack of proven long-term answers. That's a dangerous place to be in today's pass-heavy NFL. Add in the interception numbers, and it's clear why a player like Delane fits not just the draft slot, but the philosophy of what Minnesota needs right now. Let's talk production, because this is where Delane really shines. Over the past 2 college seasons, he's recorded 6 interceptions and 18 pass breakups, showing a consistent ability to disrupt plays. Those numbers aren't empty stats either. They reflect anticipation, route recognition, and confidence at the line of scrimmage, all things that translate well to the NFL. You can already imagine Brian Flores smiling at the idea of molding a corner with those instincts into his aggressive defensive system. And then there's the PFF data, which jumps off the page. In 2025, Delane earned a 91.0 coverage grade, the 3rd best among all cornerbacks in the nation. He trailed only Notre Dame's Leonard Moore and San Diego State's Chris Johnson, both elite players in their own right. That puts Delane firmly in rare company. For the Minnesota Vikings, drafting a corner with proven elite metrics is not just appealing, it feels overdue. Even more impressive is what Delane allowed in coverage. Just 13 catches, 147 yards, and 0 touchdowns throughout the entire 2025 season. That's shutdown-level production, the kind that forces quarterbacks to look elsewhere or hold the ball just a split second longer. And in the NFL, that split second can be the difference between a sack, a turnover, or a game-changing play. Because of that dominance, Delane was named a consensus All-American, further cementing his status as one of the premier defenders in college football. In Kiper's rankings, he's listed as the 2nd-best cornerback in the 2026 draft class and the 20th overall prospect regardless of position. The only corner ranked ahead of him is Tennessee's Jermad McCoy, another name Vikings fans have probably seen pop up in draft projections. This is where things get really interesting for Minnesota. Since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah took over as general manager, the Vikings have invested heavily in cornerbacks through the draft. For corners have been selected in recent years, all with the goal of stabilizing the position and building depth for the future. But here's the harsh reality. None of those four are still on the roster today. Andrew Booth and Caleb Evans, both drafted in the early rounds in 2022, were gone by the 2024 season. Injuries and inconsistency derailed what many hoped would be long-term solutions. Mekhi Blackmon, a third-round pick in 2023, showed real promise and had flashes of being the answer. But he was traded away ahead of the 2025 season. And then there's Kyrie Jackson, a fourth-round pick in 2024, whose life was tragically cut short in a fatal car accident just months after being drafted. That loss went far beyond football, and it left a hole not only on the depth chart but in the hearts of the organization and the fan base. From a football perspective, it also reinforced how cursed this position has felt for the Vikings in recent years. When you zoom out, the picture becomes even more painful. The last time the Minnesota Vikings drafted a Pro Bowl cornerback was back in 2013, when they selected Xavier Rhodes in the first round. That's more than a decade of searching, missing, and reshuffling without finding a true long-term answer on the outside. For a franchise that prides itself on defense, that drought is hard to accept. This is why Mansour Delane feels different. He's not just another project or upside pick. He's polished, productive, and battle-tested against top competition. He fits the age curve, the scheme, and the urgency of where this roster is right now. For Brian Flores, adding a corner who can play man coverage, create turnovers, and trust his technique opens up the entire defensive playbook. But of course, this is still a mock draft. A lot can change between now and draft night. Prospects rise, fall, and sometimes come out of nowhere. Teams trade up, trade back, and surprise everyone. The Vikings themselves could decide to address another position depending on how free agency unfolds. Still, when you look at the numbers, the history, and the current roster construction, it's hard to argue against cornerback being a top priority. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Mansour Delane is the kind of corner who can finally break the Vikings draft curse at the position? Would you rather see Minnesota target Jermid McCoy, or even go in a completely different direction at pick 18? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this off-season conversation is just getting started. One thing is clear. The Minnesota Vikings cannot afford to ignore the secondary any longer. Turnovers, coverage, and confidence on the outside will define the next era of this defense. If Delane truly becomes a Viking, it could mark the beginning of a long-awaited turnaround at cornerback. And that's exactly the kind of hope Vikings fans are holding on to right now. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the latest Minnesota Vikings news, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your fellow Vikings fans. Your support keeps this conversation alive, and together, we'll keep breaking down every move this team makes on the road back to contention. Skol.